got to do something. I love this quote. I heard it years ago. It's much easier to change the direction of a moving ship than it is to get one going. All you have to do is turn the rudder to change the direction. But if you're stagnant, it takes an enormous amount of energy to actually get moving.
This is episode number 9 of Short-Term Rental Success Stories. Welcome back to Short-Term Rental Success Stories. I'm your host, Julian Sage. This is a show where I talk to hosts about their journeys in starting and growing their short-term rental business. My goal is that you'll be able to walk away with practical information that'll help you become a better host and learn how to scale your business. Since we are a new show, reviews would greatly help us grow, so please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, Facebook, or wherever you're actively listening, and please leave us an honest review, and we'll give your review or rental a shout out in the next episode. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Lauren Meeks. Lauren is the founder of Bnb Made Simple, a blog for hosts who are looking to get into the Airbnb space. She's also the author of The World in Your Living Room, where Lauren talks about her experiences with guests and how it helped her overcome many of her fears and vulnerabilities. Lauren predominantly uses the co-hosting model for her short-term rental business, so in this episode, we go into a lot of detail about how she finds her co-hosting clients, the steps from finding a client to signing a contract, and everything in between, as well as overcoming the fears that come with starting something new. This is a very refreshing episode that will not only excite you to get into co-hosting, but make you feel more at ease if you have any fears about getting into this business. If you haven't done so already, go on over to our Facebook group, Short-Term Rental Success Secrets, to talk with Lauren and other successful hosts. If you'd like my show notes for this episode, go to shorttermsage.com/EP9, or if you'd like my show notes sent directly to your inbox every week, then go to shorttermsage.com/show notes. With all that being said, on to this week's conversation. Welcome back, host. Today I have the special honor of speaking with Lauren Meeks. Lauren, would you please let the audience know a little bit more about who you are and what inspired you to get into short-term rentals?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Julian. So as you said, my name's Lauren. I've been hosting short-term rentals in my own home for about 4 or 5 years now. And then I've been actually managing multiple properties for about 2 now, coming on 2 years. What inspired me, I guess, I love hospitality. That's a big value of mine. And I also really love travel and meeting new people. And I traveled a lot in college. And then when I came back to the States after college, I kind of settled down. I got a graduate degree and got married. And I was really missing that aspect of, kind of meeting people who were different from me. And it just wasn't as feasible to travel anymore. So I started hosting as a way to kind of bring the world to me. And we have, had a lot of really amazing guests that stayed with us. And then, I just realized that I really liked it. And so I started kind of pursuing it full time. But that was a couple of years after I had been hosting already.
Now, I see all the books behind you, and I love the bookcase. When we were speaking before in the conversation, you said that you actually were a freelance writer and you wrote a book called The World in Your Living Room, kind of talking about your experience of hosting, right?
Yeah. So as I was hosting, just in my own home, I was also, like you said, a full-time writer. And one of the things that I wrote a book. It'd always been a dream of mine to write a book. So I wrote a book, I self-published it. And it was really just about the stories of people that I had met while having them in my home. Because when I host, especially, in my own home, I don't just give them the keys and ignore them. I'm a very engaged host because I'm doing it because I want to meet people. So anyway, I wrote a book about it. And after that, I got all of these questions, people asking me. I kind of got a reputation as being, the Airbnb person or short-term rental. And I realized after doing that I was making a whole lot more money on the one hand doing short-term rentals, but I also enjoyed it a lot more. So it was kind of after that book, which also eventually ended up leading actually to a TEDx talk, which I was really excited and honored to be invited to. But it was after kind of those 2 things that kind of pushed me almost by accident. I didn't plan on being a full-time property manager, but I just kind of realized that's both where the money is and also where my heart is. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, and I'll include in the show notes the book and the TED Talk. The TED Talk, you can find it online, but I'll include it in the show notes. It's called the Freedom of Failure, where Lauren's talking about her experience of of trying and starting, and that whole vulnerability of being a writer and getting into different businesses. I personally am a big proponent, and I talk about this on the podcast a lot. I say, hey, you can't be afraid to start, and you can't be afraid to mess up, because that's the biggest thing, is you just have to get out there. You have to try. You have to, like you started, you started funding your freelance writing career by being able to do it on Airbnb, and maybe it could have failed, maybe you wouldn't have made that money, but you tried, and that's the process. And I think that's very inspirational. I think you're a great advocate on the short-term rental vulnerability space.
Yeah, I mean, like you're so true, Julie, and you've got to do something. I love this quote. I heard it years ago. It's much easier to change the direction of a moving ship than it is to get one going. All you have to do is turn the rudder to change the direction. But if you're stagnant, it takes an enormous amount of energy to actually get moving. So, I mean, I was actually pursuing a career in international relations. That's what my graduate degree is in. And then I started teaching English abroad, and then I worked as a business analyst, and then I became a writer, and now I'm here. So my road's been all over the place, but I was moving the whole time. You just gotta start. And you're never going to have all the pieces figured out. And you might find out later that this isn't for you, but you'll never know unless you actually, start and jump in.
Now, what I think is so interesting about you, Lauren, is like you're an artist. You're very creative. You love writing, and now you're doing something that is pretty different. You're in the hospitality, and you're dealing with guests that are very needy sometimes, and that they have all these issues. You have them staining your towels and locking themselves out of the apartment. How did you know, like, taking this artistic passion of writing, how did you know that this was something that you wanted to do, or that you would be willing to, I don't know if you've given up that previous passion, but how have you taken this new passion and kind of incorporated it with what you were doing previously?
Well, I still do a lot of writing. Now it's just mostly hospitality writing. So I have a blog on my website, Bnb Made Simple, and I, write every week about people that I've interacted with, and stories and hospitality tips and things like that. But I like to think that I kind of use my creativity as a way to make the spaces better. So I like to give away, guest freebies and things like that. A lot of hosts do that these days. But I think I might be a little different in that I try to do something that's unique to the space, and often as well to the people that are coming into the space. So, if I have one space that's really more, it's a smaller space. It's really more for couples, kind of a romantic retreat. So that space gets a little bottle of wine and wine glasses and things like that. The lake house that I manage, they get a little s'mores campfire kit, so little marshmallows and chocolate and graham crackers, and they can go make a fire and have s'mores if they want to, things like that. That I still feel like it gives me an opportunity to inject creativity even into the spaces that I'm managing. And it's a great learning experience. I love learning. And so, yeah, I've had some really crazy guests, but honestly, as I'm going, I'm having fewer and fewer crazy guests, because I learn from everything that happens. And, the first time the guests locked themselves out of the house, I added a lockbox to the house, things like that have really been engaging for me to kind of make me use my brain and think through problems and problem solve and things like that. But still be able to be a good host and also kind of exercise that creativity. As far as your question as to how I knew that I wanted to pursue this, I can point to like the exact day. Actually, I went to a conference. And this was at the time where I had been writing for full time for about a year. I had had some pretty good success with some of my articles, but it was just hard. I was just really kind of slogging through it. And at the same time, I think my book had just come out. And so I was having all these questions about Airbnb. So I was kind of really trying to decide, which path I wanted to pursue. So I went to this conference, and I did this experiment with myself. Conference is all about networking, introducing yourself. What do you do? And so I took turns introducing myself to different people as either I'm a writer or I'm a short-term rental host. And the people that I talked with when I said I was a writer, I could not get out of those conversations fast enough. Like I wasn't passionate about it enough to want to sell myself or to want to like keep talking or tell people what I was writing about. But the conversations that I had about me managing, Airbnb and short-term rental spaces, I mean, I can talk for hours about that. And I already knew like, the ins and out of the industry and all these different tools because I was researching it just because I was interested in it. And I thought it was, fascinating stuff. So to me, that made it pretty clear to me when I went to that conference that I was like, okay, I think, this is the right path for me at this point in my life because, short-term rentals, a lot of people forget that this is hospitality. It is the hospitality industry. And like you said, Julian, hospitality is hard. And you have some really cranky guests sometimes, really high maintenance guests. And so if you don't love it, it's not for you. But, I realized at that conference that I do love it. And so here I am.
I think that's great that you actually did some A and B testing to see like, am I, is following, this writer path really what I want to do, or do I want to take my passions and my interests and kind of turn it into something else? And now you've created this unique experience for your guests. Also, you're allowing them to create their own stories instead of you
Yeah.
just writing the stories. You're allowing the guests to have a story by including like the bottles of wine and including this experience that it sets you apart. And so I think it's brilliant that you've been able to take your experience and been able to convert that into an experience for your guests. What has been the most challenging part of starting your short-term rental business?
The most challenging part, I think, is probably prioritizing what's most important and finding new clients. That's challenging too. I've had a few clients that were not good clients and didn't last very long. So I'm pretty selective now in the clients that I work with because, I want it to be a good experience all around. But when you're juggling so many things and, I'm also take care of all the stuff around the house and lots of personal things as well. And I'm dealing with cleaners and photographers and refurbing spaces and all of that stuff. It's just a lot to manage. So I've had to work really hard about, being really like religious about time management, and I've got all my checklists and to-dos because if it's not on my to-do list, it just isn't going to ever get done. So there's definitely a lot of self-discipline involved with this.
Now, when we spoke, you said you have 10 units, you own one, and then you co-host 9, and then you've been Airbnb-ing for about 4 years, been doing this full time for about a year and a half now. What made you want to go the co-hosting route as opposed to purchasing and owning, or like rental arbitrage? What about the co-hosting model made you so interested?
Well, there's two main things really for me. The first one, honestly, is money. The a lack of financial responsibility, I guess. I didn't want to get saddled with another mortgage, and there's just a lot more pressure of having to, hit a certain occupancy rate or a certain income level. When obviously you have a mortgage to pay or you have a lease to pay or something like that. So I kind of shied away from that now. I'm at a place now where I'd definitely be open to that, to buying, 1 or 2 properties in a good location. But at the beginning, I didn't even know if this was something that would work out for me. I was just kind of trying to find myself, what am I doing? And so I really liked it's a lot less financial responsibility. I'm not responsible for any mortgage or any rent or anything like that. But the other thing for me that really resonates with me and might not with other people is that I feel like as part of my business, I'm enabling other families to be hospitable when they wouldn't be able to otherwise. A lot of the families that I work with, especially the ones that live there and they rent out, like carriage houses or basement suites or something like that, they have children and they just don't have time. They wouldn't have time to manage the space on their own, but They interact with the guests that we have. They have them up for dinner. And for all of my clients, who live on the property, it's been a really rewarding experience for them as well. It's been an opportunity for them to teach their kids, about hospitality and about how to treat people who are different from you and things like that. And I really like the idea that I get to kind of help enable that and in spaces that wouldn't otherwise be, have guests in it.
You said that you're very selective when you're finding your new clients. How do you base your selection process when working with someone?
At this point, all of my clients have been referrals. I have a $1,000 referral bonus, so that's a good incentive, for people to send people my way. So all of my clients are referrals. I have done some marketing, but I really don't push that because I had 2 clients previously, I don't anymore, who both found me through marketing, and they were just kind of awful clients. They were really needy and, waking me up in the middle of the night. And let's just say I made a lot of changes to my contract because of these clients. So I have found that having a personal referral, it's not a guarantee, but it makes it more likely that these people will be the types of people that I want to work with, because, they're friends with people that I already know and like and trust. But even that, like the referrals that I get, I don't sign with everyone. I have to have a face-to-face meeting with them first and see the space. Sometimes the space is not appropriate, or not something that I would want to manage. But, the people, the thing is, if you're going to pay me to manage your space, like you have to let me manage it. And so when I have people that it feels like they're going to be, kind of suffocating me or asking lots of questions or second guessing everything that I do, that's just, I'm happy, I have some training. If they want to take my training and learn how to do it themselves, that's fine. But it's not worth my sanity to try to work with people like that anymore, because I have, and it's just awful. So, I like working with people who are willing to trust me, really, is what it comes down to, which not everybody is, even if they say they are. So you kind of have to be selective.
Now, you said that you like to meet with your clients face to face. Does that mean that because you're out of the Atlanta, Georgia area, are all your clients in the Atlanta, Georgia area?
No, I do have one in South Carolina. So I guess it doesn't have to be face to face. At this point, they all have been, well, except for one who I've actually never met. That's an aside. He was referred to me by, another referral of a friend, and he lives in Virginia. And so we did everything over email and signed the contract, online, and he's been a great client to work with, but I've actually never met him. So, I'm willing to, I can be flexible. I know that not everyone's going to be in the area. We can do online or on the phone, but obviously face-to-face is always preferred. So that if possible, that's my preference.
Now, when you're working with people that are maybe out of state, how, because you're from Atlanta, the area, you have people that, cleaners, people that that you've built these relationships with. How do you kind of establish that that same type of system in another state when you don't know the people or you don't know the contractors, you don't know like boots on the ground? How do you go about doing that?
Well, that's a good question, and that's one of the biggest factors into whether I actually choose to sign with someone or not. Like I'll try to do my research before we sign and see if I can find someone that I like, and if I can't, then we don't sign, because I'm not going to be getting on a plane and flying to wherever it is, to fix problems. So you've got to have those boots on the ground. That's critical. I have had good success with, finding Airbnb host groups on Facebook and just reaching out to them, when I join them, like local groups. Like there's an Atlanta area, there's like a Columbia, South Carolina area host groups. Also another really good tool, both Properly and Turnover Bnb have cleaner marketplaces. So you can go and, look for a cleaner, upload your job, tell them, kind of how big it is, what you're expecting, all of that stuff. And their cleaners have been vetted. You can see previous reviews and things like that. So that's a really good way, to find cleaners as well. With out of town people, really or out of town properties, really I look for an excellent cleaner and, a reliable cleaner who I can trust. And then I work through her for most of the other stuff. I pay her to do supply restocking and things like that. If there's maintenance that needs to happen, I'll ask her to take pictures of it for me. And, either if she knows someone, she can work through them, or I can hire someone on, like, there's apps, there's like Tackle app, TAKL, and the Handy app, for small things. But you've got to have at least one person, who's local and who knows the area. So I focus on the cleaner. Often I can also ask the host, if the host lives there, hey, I need some help, or I need some connections, can you help me out? But it's definitely more challenging out of town for sure.
Can you kind of walk me through the process? Because when you, like, let's say I want to work with you, what are going to be the steps that you do when I'm referred to you from a mutual friend. You saw pictures of my space. You liked it. Walk me through the process of how you're going about before we sign any papers and get into a business relationship.
Yeah, sure. So if possible, I like to see the space in person. That's not always possible, but definitely if it's anything local, that will be a requirement. I usually ask to send potential clients to do a video walkthrough if I can't be there in person, just so that I can pictures don't always tell the whole story, so I want to kind of get the lay of the land, see if there's any things are there safety hazards that I might need to worry about, big yards that need to be taken care of, animals next door, anything like that. So, I want to have an idea of what I'm getting into. I also have a client intake form that I send out, and that just asks you lots of questions that are pertinent to short-term rentals. Is this a whole unit, or do you live there? If you live there, what spaces are available to the guests? Do you have a closet that I can use, for a cleaning closet and put a lock on it? Are you okay with me installing a smart lock? Things like that. So it's fairly detailed. It doesn't take that long, but, lots of yes, no questions. How big is it? How many bedrooms? So that I know, the estimate I can get to my cleaner. That's usually based on square footage or bedrooms, numbers of bedrooms. So I'll send you that, if you have any questions. I also have a few documents that I send out, that just kind of give you a summary of, here's what I charge for what I do, and then kind of what to expect after signing. So I kind of walk, that's just a document, like I said, and it walks potential clients through, what they can expect, how I operate, the tools that I use, because I try to be as transparent as possible. So I send all those documents over, and then, give clients some time to look over them. If there's any questions, usually that's just handled via email. I don't particularly care for phones, so I avoid it if I can. And then, I have a electronic contract that I send out, and we both sign it electronically. And then, we're off to the races.
Okay. And which part of the process are you do you research laws and regulations for the area? I'm not super familiar with how, because as a co-host, you're probably not as liable responsibly for if there's a rule that says, hey, you can only rent for so many days of the year. I imagine that's up to the main host. So what do you do for regulations, or for finding cleaners and getting the cleaners ready to start working with them? Because I imagine there's a lot of things on the back end. Is this before you do the contract or after you do the contract?
Yes. No, this is all before. I mean, because a lot of the stuff that you mentioned are things that, even if the owner was okay with it, I wouldn't want to work with that. I mean, if there's a lot of regulations, or, not cleaners in the area or something like that, then that's going to be a turnoff for me as well. So I generally send, I'll send the information that I and the intake form to people who are interested. But then while they're reading that, while they're looking over it, I kind of do my due diligence and kind of, do some market research on the address and regulations, like you said, see if I can find a cleaner if it's not in an area that I already service. And then when they get back to me, I will tell them. I mean, I actually just did that with a potential client last week. It just wasn't a good fit. There weren't any cleaners in the area that I really liked working with. And so I was like, sorry, this isn't a good fit. If you want to host it yourself, I can help walk you through that, because I also do some consulting as well, but I'm not going to host. So by the time I send a contract out, I'm comfortable with moving forward. And usually by then the clients have already indicated that they want to move forward as well. After the contract is signed, then we go in and, if there's any staging that needs to happen, we do that. And set up the cleaning closet, all of that stuff. I do try to, even if it's out of town, I try to be there at least once, to set it up. Because I want to make sure it's done right, and if I'm never there, that's hard for me to do. So I get it all set up. I've got a step-by-step checklist for setting up a property. It goes room by room, everything you need to do. So I just go and check off all the stuff. Also all the tech that I need to set up, the smart lock, the cameras and everything else. And so anyway, once you get that set up, then you can have a photographer come in. I don't need to be there for the photographer. Just give them a code with the smart locks on the door. And then, they email it to me. So everything else, once the property is set up, really, I don't have to be there. But, you just kind of, I do like to be there to kind of get things going.
Now, I mean, that there's a lot of work involved in establishing this type of business. Did you have like some training, or was this all kind of just through trial and error?
This was mostly through trial and error. I bought like a masterclass course on getting started with Airbnb when I first got started, and it was helpful. It gave me the confidence to at least start, to at least try. That one was focused almost entirely on rental arbitrage, so teaching people how to do that, how to get leases and, approval of the owners and stuff like that. And I decided to go in a different direction. So most of the training from that course has not been useful, but it did give me the confidence to kind of start. But after that, the rest of it has been mostly trial and error. I mean, I go to a lot of networking events, a lot of meetups, for learning about kind of what the latest regulations and tools and everything is on Airbnb. I just finished last week, actually, like a 36-hour online mastery summit, listen to all the recordings. So I'm constantly learning and trying to grow and do better. But most of it has been, either self-taught or through some of these conferences and things that I've found.
Now, Lauren, you're actually the first guest on the show that is primarily just using the co-hosting model. So I'm really curious to know a little bit more about why you did this. So like, what's the difference between project management or property management, and co-hosting?
Well, I would say I actually I use them interchangeably. Technically, I mean, there is a difference. Property management usually the traditional definition of property management is longer term rentals. So I know in Georgia, it's different in every state, but in Georgia, you actually have to have a property management license. And to get a property management license, you have to have a real estate license as well, which I don't have either of those. I do manage properties, but I manage short-term properties, and short-term rentals I'm expecting lots more regulations in the next few years, but because they're in that weird in-between phase right now where the laws and regulations haven't caught up to the short-term rental market because, Airbnb's grown so fast. It's only 10 years old, and it's only really been the last maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe 6, that it's really gotten popular. So, there isn't regulation as far as who can have an Airbnb or any sort of short-term rental, who can manage one, taxes, all of that stuff. That's all kind of, it's catching up. It'll be here soon, but it's not there right now. So when I say property management, I'm really using that term interchangeably with co-host. But I guess there are multiple different definitions for co-host as well. If you think of a co-host, I guess there's really two ways you can look at it. Either someone who's actually legitimately helping you host, I take care of bookings and they take care of managing the cleaners or, whatever. There's lots of different arrangements, but it's two people who are actually working together to manage a single space. But the other model is that I say I'm co-hosting, but really I'm doing all the hosting. So I consider it property management. My co-hosts, we are working as a team, but it's because they're providing the real estate and I'm providing the management services. So they don't do anything after, we sign on, but they're still my co-hosts because without them, I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, I think this, the whole co-hosting model, it's very interesting, and I could, because I'm a licensed realtor, and from what I know, it's like property management. You have to have the license. There's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. With co-hosting though, it's kind of like it's the wild west right now of real estate, because short-term rentals, it's kind of like that gray area where now you have the same, almost the same type of responsibility as a licensed realtor, but you don't hold any like legal. There's no legal punishment, like if you when you're handling money and stuff like that, or handling another person's property and you're getting paid for it. So it's kind of the wild west right now, and for people that are interested, it's, I think now is kind of like a good time to maybe get started. But what are you doing? Because something could change. Maybe a state starts saying, hey, you have to have a license to co-host now. Are you doing anything to be able to prepare yourself for when this type of situation does come up, or there's more strict regulations on co-hosting?
Yeah, absolutely. And I expect that probably maybe not in 2019, but by 2020, I expect something like that. So yeah, I'm actually in the process of getting my real estate license. Really, I'm trying to get my property management license, but you have to have a real estate license to do that in Georgia. So, because I want to be prepared when that happens, and this is also my profession, and I want to be professional in it. But I suspect that when these regulations come, I'm actually kind of looking forward to them, because right now, yes, they will make things a little bit harder, but once things are regulated, they're stable. And right now, the real estate market and short-term rentals and everything is like all over the place. In Atlanta, we just hosted the Super Bowl back in February, and the market went insane. We had like thousands of new listings popping up. Most of them were people who didn't know what they were doing. And those are the type of people that allow parties because they don't know how to handle it. And they allow bad guests to come in and smoke weed and whatever else. And that's what, makes the neighbors mad. And that's what makes it harder to operate short-term rentals. So I think actually regulation is a good thing, because once it's regulated and taxed, it's a lot harder to get rid of, because the city or the county governments they're getting money from this and they see the value of it. So I think that's a great idea. I know that Airbnb and other spaces or other short-term rental channels, they've got lots of lobbyists, so they're working really hard to make sure it doesn't get outlawed completely, which they have failed in a few areas of the country. But I think short-term rentals are here to stay, no question. It just depends on, certain pockets might be better places than others, but definitely there are regulations coming. And so, if you want to do this full time, you need to be aware of that and be willing to take some of the extra steps that they're going to require so that you can do it legally.
I think that's really wise of you. You're not putting, you realize that, this is a kind of a very interesting time in the short-term rental space, and you're taking advantage of the opportunity while the opportunity is still available for you to get your foot in the door, because getting licensed, getting licensed is expensive. It's not cheap to be able to, you have to spend over 60 hours of training. And when I took my training, it was well over, like I spent 200 hours just preparing for the tests. There's multiple tests you have to take. You have to, become a licensed realtor, depending on where you are. You have to associate with a brokerage. There's all these fees involved. So, I mean, the barrier to entry right now to get into the space is just so low. It's just so crazy.
Mhm.
Anybody and their grandmother can just become a co-host and start managing, hundreds of properties. But in the real estate world, like that's not normal. It's
Yeah.
unique.
Well, and it's not really safe either. I mean, there's a reason that you had to go through all that training because you were being educated as far as, anti-discrimination laws and all sorts of the legalities of treating people, with dignity and respect and following the letter of the law when dealing with real estate. So I think, I think maybe another certification will come up, a short-term rental property management certification that you're required to have. I don't know, it might be different than a traditional property management license, but I think it's totally reasonable to expect people who are managing short-term rentals to have some sort of training because, I mean, they're dealing with lot more people than the traditional property manager would deal with because they have, a single tenant for a year or years on end. I mean, there's safety concerns, there's discrimination concerns, and those are all valid. And I think it's important to be trained in them if you want to do this.
What has been the most challenging part of scaling your short-term rental business?
Cleaners, finding good cleaners. Only one cleaner can only do so much, and I mean, I would argue actually that cleaners even for my business, which is built on the co-host model, and so obviously I have to have owners to have a business. I would argue that cleaners are more important than the owners because I can always find a new person who's interested in short-term rental. Honestly, it's just, it's like the fad of the decade right now. But finding a dependable cleaner, that's gold.
And how do you process your cleaners? Like, take me through the process of you scouting for a cleaner and then establishing that trust and relationship and actually allowing them to be able to work with you.
At this point, it's relatively informal. So I have a checklist for every property, and they're mostly the same. But there's a few differences depending on the property, and it goes room by room. This is what I want you to do every time you come. And so when I'm meeting with a new cleaner, I start by, well, obviously, I have to meet them first, and that's a no question. I have to meet the cleaner in person, or I won't work with them. But so, I'll usually give them a trial period, ask for references first, talk to the references, and then I'll give them a trial cleaning. So I'll meet them after a guest checks out and say, here's the cleaning, here's the space. I want you to clean it, follow this checklist. And if they do a good job, I'll give them usually 3 or 4 like trial cleanings. And then if they're working out, if they're dependable, actually after the first one, what I'll do is I'll sync my calendar with them because I want to see if they can get the cleaning done without me scheduling it. So I sync my calendar with them. I tell them, you've got the cleanings for the next 2 weeks or something like that. And then I spot check them after, because I can tell on my smart lock if they've actually come or not. So after they've come, I will go and, check up after them and see if they're doing a good job. And if they are, after 2 weeks, I have a couple of cleaners on the same property. I use turnover Bnb. And so basically the way it works is a cleaning is scheduled, but it goes out kind of to all of my approved cleaners. And then whoever wants it, whoever gets to it first and says they're going to take it, they get it. So they know they're in competition with other people, which I think kind of also helps them do a better job because they know they're not indispensable. And it's also easier for me because I don't have to worry about fairly splitting it up or anything. It's the harder you work, the more work you get.
Well, that's pretty unique. The mindset that you have that, they have to do a good job. Otherwise, you're not going to be working with them if they're not as good as the other cleaners. It's like, well, I'm sorry. It's like you miss a bunch of things. You're not following the checklist. You're showing up late, and you're indispensable. It's kind of tough to have to fire someone, but if they're not meeting your
Yeah.
expectations, because this is what your business is, it's on hospitality, cleanliness, then it's like, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I'm gonna have to let you go.
Well, and that's why I think a checklist is so important because then, I mean, it's black and white. These are my expectations every time. I don't care if you send someone else, if you hire a subcontractor, that's fine. It's your business, do your thing. But if the people you hire can't follow this, then, I mean, you're responsible for the people that you hire as well. So, it's black and white. These are my expectations, which also makes it easier to address issues if they come up. If your expectations are vague, then you can't really, in good faith, tell someone, hey, you didn't meet my expectations because they didn't really know what your expectations were. But if you have, a step by step, everything you want done in every room, then it makes it a lot easier to have those hard conversations.
What would you do differently if you had to start from scratch?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I think I would just start earlier. I don't think I would do anything different, but it's been a great ride and I wish I'd been doing it for more time. But even as I'm saying that, if I had started earlier, I probably wouldn't have been a writer, which means I wouldn't have written a book or gotten a TED Talk, and those all kind of brought me to where I am today. Um, if I had to pick one thing, actually, I'd say I'd have a better contract starting off. That's really important.
Did you have to work with a lawyer to get this contract written?
Yeah, I had a contract. I mean, I've had a contract signed with all of my clients, and with all of them, I had a contract lawyer review it beforehand. So, like legally, I was covered. I wasn't worried about that. But contract lawyers don't know the ins and outs of a short-term rental business and management, especially. Um, so there's just things that they didn't think about, which it's no fault of their own. Like this is a very unusual contract that they probably don't work with very often, but things like, charging extra for after hours service. Like if your owner does something that requires you to work when you wouldn't have otherwise, I charge for that now. But I didn't when I first started, but I had a really bad client who was always calling me in the middle of the night. So that's something that I added. What else? Like insurance, who buys insurance, what insurance needs to be bought, things like that. Termination fees or things like that. What happens if I ask all of my clients to commit to at least 3 months, because I think you need at least 3 months just to get a space up and running, and they're not going to have a fair idea of what it's like until 3 months. So, what happens if they try to leave early or something like that? All of those issues were not actually addressed in my contract initially. So I would love to have had the contract I have now when I started, but the one that I have now is from trial and error. So I guess that's kind of a pipe dream there.
When you wrote your first contract, did you go off like a template, or did you just create everything that you thought you needed?
I went off a template. I mean, I heavily edited it, to suit my needs, because I was creating this contract after years of hosting in my own space. So I had an idea of what was going to happen, but I had never worked with homeowners, and so I definitely didn't cover all of the issues that came up. So I had my first contract. I wrote my first contract, from a template, and then added things, and then I had a contract lawyer look at it. And then about a year, well, really after every client, after issues came up, I would modify my contract. And so now I haven't modified it in about 6 months now. So it was about a year of editing based on needs that came up and issues that I hadn't thought of. But then I sent it back to the contract lawyer, got it re-reviewed. So now I'm pretty confident in what I have now, but it's definitely been a trial and error process to get there.
Awesome. Are there any tools that you use to manage your properties?
I love Your Porter. I'm like such a Your Porter fangirl. Oh my goodness. Your Porter is a messaging tool basically, but it does a lot of other things as well. So if you've heard of Smart Bnb or Guesty, it's kind of along the same lines as those. But it does automated messages, which is huge for me. It also does automatic reviews, auto inquiry responses. It also has income reports, which for me is huge. It's the only tool I've been able to find actually that will do that. And when I have, since I'm working with clients, I have to have that. So at the end of every month, I can pull up an income report and have it split out, the commission based on what we've agreed on. And I just send that to them with their commission check. And it just makes the whole process really easy and upfront and transparent. And then they also actually just rolled out a few months ago, they have a direct booking site as well that you can set up through your porter. So after guests check out, I'll send them that link. And I've gotten a few bookings as well outside of any, Airbnb or booking or anything like that. So, trying to build up my client base as well so that they don't have to use the standard channels. It also integrates directly right now with Airbnb and booking.com. And I think they're working on HomeAway. They should have that over the summer. So it's a great tool, and it's one of the cheapest out there. It's like between $5 to $7 per listing per month, which is much, much cheaper than most of the tools that do similar things. So that's definitely my favorite tool.
Great. Yeah, you did an awesome job at explaining what it is and highlighting the benefits. I'm definitely going to have to check out your porter. It sounds very useful. Are there any products that you couldn't live without in your rentals that have helped save you time and money? Something like a particular type of squeegee or cleaning product or anything like that?
I would say probably my most indispensable product that I use is my smart locks, which is a lot more expensive maybe than you were going for. But I have a smart lock on every property. I use August locks, and I can set it up. I can create a unique code for every guest. So guests never get keys, which for my homeowners, that increases their peace of mind a lot. And then the code expires when the guest checks out. So, it's a really safe way to give them access. And then I can see everything from my phone. I can auto unlock it from my phone if I need to, if they're having trouble. So August locks have saved me so much time and headaches from people getting locked out, or they can't figure out how to open the door or whatever. Definitely recommend them.
August Locks, isn't that the one where you have to download an app?
So yes and no, actually. You do. They do have an app, which if you only use the lock, you do have to download an app. But I didn't ever want to mess with that. So I have the August lock, and they have a smart keypad. So if you have both, it's a little bit more, but the keypad's only like 40 or 50 bucks, I think. So that for me, that's like well worth the investment. So I never have them download the app. I just tell them my standard message that automatically sends. I don't have to change it for every guest because their code is the last 4 digits of their phone number. So I just tell them that. And then, in the app, I can set that code for them. And then on the keypad, they just put in that code and they never have to download the app.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I was under the impression that it was only the app, which kind of deterred me away from the August locks.
If it was just the app, I would not be raving about it for sure. The app works great. I use it, because I'm an owner. You have to use it if you're an owner. But some people don't have smartphones. You have international travelers who might not have data plan or something. Some people don't even check-in instructions until they're right there, and then that's frustrating. So I didn't want to deal with the app at all. I just give people a code on the keypad, and it works really well.
Is there anything that has helped your guests leave positive reviews?
Yes, actually, which kind of surprised me. So, we've all seen those guests that they give you like 5 stars on all of the subcategories, and then the main rating, the only one that counts, they give you like a 4 stars or even a 3 stars, which I find so frustrating. I'm like, you didn't give me anything to improve on, but you're not giving me 5 stars. And so what I started an experiment about 6 months ago. And one of the automated messages that I have set up through your porter, I think the day that they check out, I just say, hey, thanks for coming, and we hope you had a great time. And I don't ask for a 5-star review. I think that's tacky. But what I say is, many guests don't know this, but anything less than a 5-star review, even 4 stars, will reflect negatively on us as a host in our overall rankings. So if there's anything that's happened, that would keep you from giving me a 5-star rating, please let me know. Give me a chance to deal with it before you leave me a review. And I've actually had, that's not the only touch point. I check in on them the first morning after they check in and things like that. So they've felt taken care of throughout their stay. It's not like I'm just springing this on them at the end of the stay. But I've actually had guests who have said to me, oh, thanks for telling me that. I didn't realize that a 4-star would reflect badly on you. I'll give you a 5-star. So that's been actually like a really simple thing, just letting them know, like, you are free to leave whatever rating you want, but it's important to me that you have a good stay. And so I have done everything I can to give you a good stay. If you had a good stay, just leave 5 stars. And I've actually not gotten, well, I got one, I think a 3-star rating with a terrible guest, so I'm not surprised about that. But other than that, in 6 months, I haven't gotten anything other than a 5-star rating.
Wow, that's brilliant.
That was a really simple way to just, and I don't think it's tacky. I've gotten some requests from guests, from hosts when I travel. They're like, hey, leave me 5 stars and I'll give you a $10 credit back or something like that, which A, violates Airbnb's extortion policy. So don't do that. And B, that's just tacky. Like, I don't think that's very professional at all. But just informing them of what, here's the reality, because it's true. If you get, you have to keep a 4.8 average to maintain superhost status. So if you get all 4s, that does negatively affect you. Just let them know and they can make their own decision.
That's great. Is that okay if I start using that one, Lauren?
Yeah, that's fine. Go for it.
Awesome. Is there one house rule that has saved your butt before?
Smoking. I have like a couple of houses that I don't know why they just attract smokers. And I had a house rule of no smoking, but then they violated it and I didn't have any fine imposed or anything. So there was really nothing that I could do. And so I changed my house rule to say no smoking of any kind. That's the other thing. If you say no smoking, a lot of people will think vaping is okay, or, maybe smoking weed or something. So you have to be very, very specific. No smoking of any kind. This includes cigarette, vaping, weed, anything. And I also include a fine if they don't, which technically comes out of the security deposit, which they have to approve, guests have to approve. So that's doesn't usually happen. But if you have it in your house rules that you require that there's a fee for smoking, and then you can prove that they did smoke, often Airbnb will actually pay you out of their host guarantee, host insurance policy. So I charge a fee because it costs me extra to have the house fumigated, basically. And so I have the receipt from my cleaners, from the smoke remediation people. I send in the pictures of the ash and the smoke remediation, and Airbnb has always reimbursed me. So that's been really helpful. I mean, yes, I'd love to keep people from smoking, but sometimes they're going to. So you have to, if you want anything, any amount of money or penalties or anything from a guest, you have to specify it in your house rules. That's what I would recommend.
Great. Yeah, great advice. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's trying to start their short-term rental business, what would that be?
What version of short-term rental? Are we talking rental arbitrage, co-hosting, or managing their own space?
Let's do co-hosting.
Co-hosting? All right. I would say have a good contract. I think that's the most important thing. Be really clear about, what the expectations are, and protect yourself, because you're going to have clients that ask too much of you, and you need to have, a way to kind of push back, or you're gonna not enjoy this in a hurry.
And where do you?
I would also say, talk to people who have done this. Like, reach out. I mean, they're welcome to reach out to me if they have questions. A lot of it you don't know what you don't know, but there are other people who have been doing this longer who can help you not make the same mistakes they did.
Great. Yeah, I'll include your contact information in the show notes and all the ways that people can reach you as well. And where do you see short-term rentals in the future?
Oh, I think they're here to stay for sure. They've captured a niche of the market that hotels simply can't. can't compete with. I mean, it's a whole subgroup of people who like traveling, staying in houses, and they like traveling, having access to kitchens and backyards and things like that. So they're definitely here to stay. Overall, again, like there's going to be different areas of the country or of the world that have tighter or looser regulations on short-term rentals. But I see over the next few years, like we talked about earlier, more regulation happening, which will kind of even out the growth. There's going to be a lot more. I see short-term rentals becoming professionalized, which we already see that. I mean, that's why I'm here, right? That's what I'm doing. So a lot more companies managing short-term rentals to kind of give you the same standard hotel experience that you expect. When you go to a hotel, you expect towels every time and soap and all of this stuff. So that uniformity of service, but with the uniqueness of houses or condos or whatever it is that the short-term rental place is. I see a lot as regulation ramps up. There will be a lot fewer just mom and pop people jumping into it, but hopefully they'll still at least be allowed to do it in their own homes. I think that's what Airbnb started. That's how they started. Was the founders were trying to make money from a conference that was happening in their city. And I think, in my own personal experience, I think that's one of still the more valuable things about Airbnb is just your exposure to people that are different from you. So I definitely see on the whole kind of more professionalization, but I really, really hope that we're not regulated out of having it in our own space, because I think that's really valuable.
And is there any way that people can reach you, Lauren?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is through my website, bnbmadesimple.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, Bnb Made Simple. So just search for that. And I've got contact pages on there, and they can find you through that.
Of course, great. And I'll include, again, everything in the show notes. Lauren, it's been such a fun conversation with you. I loved learning about this whole co-hosting model and you sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience. You're an expert in the field of short-term rentals, having the TED Talk and the book and having the blog and being a writer. I think you're killing it. I continue to wish you success, and I'm looking forward to seeing where your business goes to next.
Thank you, Julian. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm excited about it too.
All right, everybody. Well, keep on hosting, and until next time, talk to you later. Hope you hosts benefited from the show. If you found value, please go on over to iTunes or Stitcher, leave a review, and let us know what you enjoy about the show. If you'd like to talk to the hosts that have been featured in these episodes, as well as the Host Nation, then go on over to our Facebook group, Short-Term Rental Success Secrets. Talk to you hosts in the next episode. Keep on hosting.